Hey everybody, welcome back. I've got another video for you today of me fixing something on my skid steer, my JCB 260T. So if you have a JCB or if you've been around them or been around skid steers at all, you might realize already that this is the windshield frame off of my skid steer. Unfortunately, the glass windshield that I had in my skid steer got broken recently, and it was my fault 100%. What happened was I was doing some work on the skid steer that was unrelated to the windshield area. The place I had it sitting, I had a piece of pipe leaned up against something else. Some stuff moved and that pipe fell over. And the bad part about it is that where the pipe caught the windshield was down here in the very, very corner. It was at the very, very edge of the windshield. Well, it nicked the edge of the windshield, and the whole thing just shattered into a million pieces. So, I guess if you want to look at the bright side, that gives me the opportunity to put a Lexan windshield on my skid steer. I do have a heavy-duty brush cutter that I use, and I know a lot of times manufacturers, industry people recommend that if you're going to use a brush cutter, brush hog, whatever you want to call it, that a Lexan windshield is a good thing to have. Because if something hits the windshield or something tries to come through the windshield, Lexan won't shatter like a piece of tempered safety glass will. So, like I said, I'm looking at the bright side because that's one of two alternatives I have. So I'll look at the bright side. This gives me an opportunity to put a Lexan windshield that will hopefully be a little safer, a little more durable than the glass was. So as you can see, I've already got the windshield frame off the skid steer. I've got it cleaned up. I got all of the old windshield adhesive off. I've got it cleaned. It's ready to go. I'm just ready to put my Lexan in and go from there. Now, what I used to get the windshield adhesive off, just used a razor blade scraper, and I used some acetone. Acetone did a pretty good job of softening up the windshield adhesive that I couldn't get with the scraper. I got it pretty clean. It's not 100% clean. There is a little bit of adhesive, real thin layer in places. You can kind of see there. I think the new stuff is going to stick to that fine. It's a little bit, I did this yesterday, so it's dried overnight. It's a little bit too tacky, and so I'm hoping that it'll bond well to the new adhesive. Now, one thing you might notice is that on JCB skid steers, this is the area right here where the windshield wiper would usually be, the motor and the wiper and all. The motor, the shaft that turns the wiper arm actually comes through here, and there's a set of I don't know if you call them spindles, there's a set of shafts right here, and that is what the actual arm mounts to. This is the hole that the windshield wiper fluid would usually come through to be squirted on the outside of the windshield. I took my windshield wiper arms off a long time ago because they were just in the way, and I was never going to use them. I don't operate in the rain. I don't operate in the snow because we only get, a little bit of snow every year, and usually it's not enough to need to plow anyways. So I had already taken my windshield wiper arms off a long time ago. But when I broke this and I decided to put Lexan in it, I went ahead and I completely removed the wiper motor, the whole assembly, and I am gonna leave it off. Leaving it on would have made the cutting this Lexan a lot more difficult, because I would have had to cut out around the profile and all. I don't use it. I'm leaving it off. It's going to make my job here a lot easier, and I think you're going to see in just a minute why that's the case. Now, flip it over. You can see that the seal, this is a seal that goes against the rollover protection, the window frame and the cab frame. So that seal is fine. Didn't need to do anything there, and so let's get to it. All right, so what I have here is just a flat Lexan sheet, and where I got this from is I ordered it from Total Plastics International. They're out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And what I bought was Lexan polycarbonate, and this sheet is 48 inches by 32 inches, and it's 1/4 of an inch thick. Now, the reason that I bought the size that I did will become pretty apparent here in just a second. They had different thicknesses. They had thinner sheets. They had thicker sheets. I decided that, the glass that was in here already was probably not 1/4 of an inch thick. And with Lexan being more durable than the glass, is, I decided that 1/4 inch was thick enough. Now, I know you can get 1/2 inch, like bulletproof. I don't know if it actually is a bulletproof glass or not. You can get glass or Lexan that's much thicker. I figured 1/4 inch was a good compromise between durability and cost, because the thicker the sheet, obviously the more expensive, and it, I think a 1/2 inch sheet was more than double what the 1/4 inch sheet was. So, and I just didn't feel like I needed a sheet that was any thicker than 1/4 inch. So it's 48 inches long. It's 32 inches wide. Now, one advantage that I have is that my windshield frame here is completely flat. So rather than order a pre-cut windshield, I saved some money. I think I saved some money. We're going to find out. But I saved some money because I just bought a flat Lexan sheet, and I am going to trim it to fit. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the windshield frame back up here, and I'm going to take my measurements, and I'm going to lay them out on the Lexan sheet. All right, so this is what I came up with. These are fairly rough measurements. I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room on these. With these measurements, I should be able to lay everything out in an appropriate manner. I don't think I missed any dimensions. If I did, then I can just measure what I need to get. Now, the nice thing about the piece of Lexan that I bought is that the piece of Lexan is exactly 32 inches wide. And give me just a sec. And you'll notice here, the inside of the frame where the Lexan is going to sit is 32 1/4. So I won't have to trim any width off of the long side or the long edge of the piece of Lexan. So that is one of the reasons why I bought this piece or this size of Lexan. I was trying to minimize the amount of trimming and the amount of cutting that I was going to have to do. I think I'm going to mark this side. All right. So first things first. Now this is 48 inches. It's 48 inches on the long side, and the windshield itself is going to be right around 39 inches total. So I am going to have to trim some off of the short side here, but again, none off of the long side, or none off of, you know, both edges. All right, so there is the windshield. Now again, this is scrap right here. The whole bottom part here is scrap. The little wedges cut out for the top, and the wedges that are cut out for the, or I'm sorry, that was the bottom, this is the top. Wedges that are cut out up here, they're actually a different size. It's a different angle to fit the window frame. So how am I going to cut this piece of Lexan? Well, my plan is I'm going to use this bandsaw. Now, there's a few different ways that I've read that you can cut Lexan, and one of the most common ways anymore is with a router, like with a CNC table or whatever. I've read that you can use a circular saw, like on a table saw, and as long as you use a very high tooth count blade in a circular saw, I think that would be fine. I think if it was like a ripping blade or something very aggressive, you might have problems feeding the Lexan too fast. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use my good old Craftsman from the 1970s bandsaw that I cut just about everything on other than metal. Can't cut metal. Not with this blade anyways. I'm going to use this. Is it going to work? I don't know, but that's what I'm going to try. Now, this has got a, I don't know, this was probably a 5 to 6 tooth per inch blade in it. Now, if I had my choice, I would probably use a blade that had double the amount of teeth per inch, so like a 10 tooth per inch or a 12 tooth per inch blade. But I'm just going to give it a shot. I'm going to keep my feed rate slow, and I'm going to see how it works. Now, a confession here for you guys. I've already cut the Lexan, so I know it's going to work. But like a complete newbie, I guess, I thought I hit record, but in hindsight, what I was recording was all the stuff leading up to the point where I wanted to record, and I missed all of the cutting of the Lexan. So I'm going to show you on a scrap piece how well this cuts. So as you can see there, it cut the Lexan great, had no problems. Even with this this blade I was talking about having a higher tooth count than I really would have preferred, it had absolutely no problem, cut very well, no sticking, no nothing. So I would say that if you are trying to cut some Lexan and you've got an old bandsaw, or you can find an old bandsaw, that's a great way to do it. All right, so here it is, all cut and all laid out. Now I'm pretty happy with it, except for down here in the bottom, I mismeasured when I was getting my measurements. This would have been a 45-degree angle if I had really been paying attention, but I wasn't. So unfortunately, this doesn't fit like I wanted it to. However, there is still going to be enough of the window frame under here that I won't have any trouble getting enough glue down to get it sealed. So I'll show you in just a second what I'm going to use to glue this down, and then we'll get started with that. All right, so to put this windshield on, I'm going to be using urethane windshield adhesive. Now I did a little, this is just from my my auto parts store, my local auto parts store. I did a little bit of research, and everything that I could tell, it said that urethane windshield adhesive would work fine for Lexan. I did use a couple of pieces of a strap that I cut off when I was testing to make sure that the bandsaw was going to work, and they stuck together just fine. One thing I was worried about whether or not there would be any discoloration around where the adhesive was, and there's no discoloration. It all looks fine. It appears that it's sticking together pretty well, so that's what I'm going to use. So you just put it on with a normal caulk gun. I'm going to put it on pretty liberally. For one thing, I don't have any more windshields, any more glass to put in. So I want to use up all of this tube. For another thing, I don't want there to be any gaps to let dust and dirt in. I'm putting a fairly thick bead all the way around, trying to make sure that I use plenty, but at the same time I have enough to go all the way around. Once I've made it all the way around, I'll probably go back in a few places and put some extra in. But first off, I just want to make sure that I can make it all the way around. Before I run out. All right, so that's kind of the size of the bead that I used all the way around. It's about, I would say it's about as wide as my pinky, kind of all the way around. I'm going to go back around, and I'm going to loop around these bolt holes that hold this in. I'm going to put some additional adhesive around this area and around these holes so that I don't get dirt between the window frame and the glass. And I might as well, because I need to use up the rest of the adhesive anyways. I just want to make sure that I do not miss any spots, because it's irritating whenever you've got to go back through and seal up places where the windows are leaking. I've had to do that already on this machine, and it's aggravating. And you could tell it was because whoever put the glass in the last time did not do a great job of making sure they used enough adhesive. I'm going to put some extra adhesive in these corners here where these welds are. I feel like that was a problem area in the past, where these welds in the windshield frame are. This stuff is pretty thick. I thought it would be more like silicone, but it's quite a bit thicker than silicone, I'm finding. Which I would say, honestly, it's a little bit easier to work with than silicone. It's not quite as stringy. I don't know how much of this tube was left, but one tube is definitely plenty for one windshield. Might be able to seal the whole machine with one tube. This stuff is probably going to be squishing out all over the place whenever I go to clamp it down. But I would rather have it squishing out all over the place than there to be gaps in the sealant. And I don't plan to really mash it down either, because there's these spots where these welds are in the frame, and you can't get the window or the glass or the urethane, or not the urethane but the Lexan, you can't get it all the way down against the window frame, so you have to leave it out a little bit to float. All right, that is the end of the tube. So that worked out pretty well. Don't have any excess, and I used up pretty much the whole tube. And I think I got adhesive everywhere I needed it to be. So one thing I did not mention earlier is that this Lexan has got clear plastic, or it's got plastic on both sides. Now leave the plastic on the sheet until you are completely finished and ready to install it. So while you're cutting, while you're marking, while you're doing whatever, make sure you leave the sheet on, because that is what protects it from getting scratched when you've got it on the saw, or when you've got it on the table and you're moving it around. But by the same token, make sure you remember to take the plastic off before you stick it down. All right. Let's see if we can get this put down and not make a huge mess. All right, that worked pretty well. All right, now I've got some boards, and I'm going to clamp this down strategically. Just using some clamps. And again, the idea is not to just clamp the snot out of it. The idea is just to force it down, make it secure, and not squeeze all of the adhesive out from between the window and the frame. All right, so that's all clamped down. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna leave that just the way it is overnight, and we'll see how it looks tomorrow. All right, it's 24 hours later, and if you'll notice, I replaced the clamps with a bunch of bricks. I do believe that this is probably set long enough to serve our purpose, so I'm gonna unload these bricks. And we're going to finish up installing the windshield. I went to the bricks because I wanted to get a more uniform press everywhere around the perimeter of the windshield. And I just happen to have some bricks from another project at the house laying around. So, let me finish unloading these, and we'll flip it over and see how it looks on the other side. All right, let's see here how we did. Looks pretty good. I got plenty of squeeze all around the edges, looks like. Now, one thing that I thought of last night is that if I had to do this over again, probably along the outside 1 inch of the entire piece of Lexan. I might take a piece of like a piece of Scotch-Brite pad, or like a Scotch-Brite little wheel on my drill, and scuff that up all around the edge where it was gonna stick to the adhesive. That might be that might help the Lexan stick to the adhesive a little better. So if I ever do this again, I might think about doing that. All right, I'm gonna get this set up and we will get it bolted onto the skid steer. Now another thing that I'm gonna do is around the edge here, where these two seams come to, or these two pieces of metal come together, there's a seam. So there's one up high on both sides, and then there's this one that's down low. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use some silicone, and I am going to fill that in before I put the windshield frame against the skid steer. All right, so there's my silicone that I put on. Now this is white, but it'll actually dry clear. Again, I just put it on the four corners there where the seam meets. All right, I've got everything ready to go here, and I'm just going to set the window frame back in where it goes. Back in where it goes. Like that. Hopefully it will stay put well enough that I can get inside without falling. Because I don't really have any spare hands. Just get a couple of bolts started on each side, then I can adjust. All right, so I'm inside now. Just putting the brackets that hold the windshield in place together. Just 2 bolts on each side and these brackets here. It's really simple way of mounting a windshield frame. Okay, now just kind of want to make sure that it's centered fairly well. It's fairly straight. Looks like it's fairly straight. Looks like it's fairly centered. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these up. Pretty solid. Pretty So there. All right, there we have it. Windshield is in there. All right, so there it is. Now for, I guess, maybe the big reveal. Let's grab the corner up here. We'll pull it off. All right. That looks pretty good, I think. Looks like we had pretty good contact with the adhesive all the way around. There are a few bubbles kind of here and there. I think I got enough adhesive on that it shouldn't make any difference. I think I got this all sealed up well enough that it's not going to get dirt inside here. Other than cutting this wrong, which I should have just paid closer attention when I cut this or when I measured this, I think it turned out pretty good. I think it turned out just about like how I expected it to turn out. And I went back and looked at my records, and this piece of 1/4 inch Lexan, when I bought it in the in January of 2026, cost me $235 for the 1/4 inch Lexan sheet that was 32 inches wide and 48 inches tall. The adhesive that I used, the windshield adhesive that I used, cost me $35 for the tube. And so that's a grand total of $270. And I couldn't find, I didn't look real hard, but this morning I just kind of took a look around and I could not find a windshield for this skid steer for less than about $490. And that was for a Lexan 1/4 inch windshield, and they just went up from there. So I hope you guys found this useful. Since this windshield is flat and it's just all one piece, it's really not that difficult to make your own windshield. And even if I think if I had wanted to leave the windshield wiper and the motor and all that on, it wouldn't have been a big deal to just cut around that and to cut it to fit like a factory windshield would have fit. It really wouldn't have been that hard. So guys, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. If you did, give me a thumbs up or put it down in the comments. Thanks.